All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to our final edition of the season here of This Week at Missouri Politics. And so we decided to have an all-panel discussion, and we brought back 4 of our favorites, one of them being new. We'll start with Michael Kelley, the Kelley Group founder, chief, head, KMOX fame, now Fox 2, right?
Scott Fawn fan club president.
Indeed. Well, that's why you're here. First time we had Lou Hamilton on from here in St. Louis, city lobbyist, communications extraordinaire, correct? And then Jeff City, known as the true friend of John Barklage.
It must be true.
Jane Dueker, Spencer Fane now, right?
Yes.
As of when?
As of about a month.
Nice. And now officially of KMOX, right?
I am, yes. Thrilled to do it.
And the Yoda of Republican politics, David Barklage of Barklage, Nodell, and the person who makes every Democrat cringe a little bit when they hear the name, right? So I said. So we'll start off with a minimum wage, David. I'm sure that you're a big fan of the $15 minimum wage.
No. You know, I mean, one, there's competitive issues. There are, I mean, the whole way that the mayor and the council's going at it, I just think it's the wrong thing to do, and I think it's the wrong time to do it, and I think the impact that they're going to have by doing it is not what we want. One estimate is 3,100 jobs potentially lost, and, you know, I don't know about you guys, but most, when I go to McDonald's, when I go to most of these places, they're young people, college, high school, things like that, especially the minority community. These are sort of entry jobs. They're not career jobs. And, you know, we're taking away a lot of opportunity there. And it's going to be very, very tough on business. So I think there's a lot of reasons that this is a bad proposal.
Jane Dueker.
Missourians, when presented with the opportunity to raise the minimum wage in 2006, they did so. 76% of Missourians authorized an increase in the minimum wage and, you know, put escalators on. So I think if done correctly, Missourians see the value of raising the minimum wage. And I think that there's been some initiative petitions filed. I think it's properly a state issue. My biggest problem with it is not only the effect on business and the effect on St. Louis, you know, right at this moment in time, but I just don't think the city has the legal authority to do it. So I think we're going to go through all of this discussion and rigmarole and posturing to find out that they don't have authority to do it. And I wonder if it doesn't have a negative impact on the future discussion of increasing the minimum wage. And, you know, there's a sweet spot there. There's something that can be done that will help the economy and help those in need. Bureau of Labor Statistics say 50% of people who are on minimum wage are 26 and below.
Can I continue to filibuster?
I'm sorry. I'm a lawyer.
I think David's wrong when he
reckon.
says that it's mainly entry-level jobs. That's just not true. So many people are having to live now on the minimum wage, and no one should have to work 40 hours a week and remain in poverty.
That's what 8 years of Obama will do to you.
But here's the reality. I think the mayor's approach is smart in that he's saying, hey, it's time for a raise in the minimum wage. Jefferson City and Washington, D.C. have failed us. But he's made himself an island with the city of St. Louis in terms of really, you know, we do smoking bans regionally in the St. Louis area, but we're not going to do a
So what's smart about it again?
Mike, you're noted as a big fan of the Missouri legislature. The mayor would point out that this is because the legislature won't act to give a real minimum wage.
He's right.
Is that?
That's exactly what the problem is here. But I think the way the legislation is proposed in the city of St. Louis, it really isolates the city, and it's ultimately going to hurt the people that they're trying to help in raising the minimum wage.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, who can be against paying people more money?
Right.
Nobody is
Missourians
against
aren't.
that, right? Even the hard-hearted Republicans aren't against people making a living wage, right? But what you said is absolutely correct. To isolate the city as an island unto itself. Whether it's legal or not, I'm thinking you're right, Jane, on that. But you put the city, which is already struggling, at a more extreme competitive disadvantage. I mean, look at the testimony that's come out so far. There was a fellow that owns a small business down in South St. Louis that the Post-Dispatch featured a week ago. He has a label business. He's got 30 employees. He pays most of them over $10 an hour. He pays them benefits. He rents his facility. He says, if this happens, I'm out of business. So guess what? I'm looking for property in St. Louis County. I'm going to move over there and take my 30 jobs.
Look at the mayor's folks will tell you that the president came out after some of the issues that St. Louis had last year and said part of the reason is economic inequality, and this is something he's trying to do to address that. If the minimum wage goes to $10 an hour in this state, does Francis Slay have a victory?
I think the people have a victory if we go to $10.
But Barklage, if this is a strategy of maybe setting the bar a little higher than it would be, and in the end of time, the minimum wage goes to $10, is that a victory for Slay?
I think that would be a bizarre strategy and a hell of a long way to get to a victory. So I think that everybody here is dancing around the issue that we all agree that this specific proposal is a bad idea at this time for St. Louis.
I'm hopeful that the mayor shifts his narrative and really talks about what's the real problem here, and that is a tone-deaf Republican Jefferson City who's turning its back on the people of the state of Missouri. And by focusing solely on the city, which was all the mayor has the power over, I understand the predicament he's in. I think it ultimately hurts him, but I think we transition a battle to this is Jefferson City failing, as they do on so many issues, and especially when it comes to working people issues.
MSK stands for Message Serially Carried, right?
Exactly.
Jeff City, Jeff City, Jeff City. Jane Dueker, speaking of Jeff City, there was some news in the last couple weeks. It seems as though folks aren't caring as much about what Jeff City does. It seems there's this weird obsession now with kind of a TMZ flavor of fishing through police reports and coming up with, I mean, people, these are humans. There's complicated lives. Imagine if in the 80s people had a TMZ flair. Is there a point where politicians' personal lives should just be left alone?
Well, I mean, I think we had this debate with Bill Clinton and others, and a lot of people wanted to make personal lives, subject of lots of discussion and impeachments, and I think there's a line, and I think, for me, personally, I think it should be tied to whether the people's work is getting done. That should be the standard by which the discussion, to me, begins and ends. And so if some of this stuff has an effect on whether the people's work is getting done, I think that's a legitimate discussion. If it doesn't, I'm not sure how that benefits, the people. I mean, we can, I think you could follow anybody for a night,
sure,
and see things that could be, taken out of context. And I'm not defending what did or didn't happen on any given night, but I think that if you have to be able to tie it to the people's work.
You're a veteran of Jefferson City. Is this scrutiny of people's personal lives getting a little out of hand?
Well, I think if you're reporting on conduct that is not related to the official office, I think that's a real questionable one. I think the unfortunate thing is it drives a narrative that we're seeing in Jeff City that we've seen as the Democrat majority was mature. We saw it a lot of times, and now we're seeing among Republicans that we have a system that effectively creates behavior, corruption, if you want to see it, that needs to be changed. And I think it all circles around the sort of the social life that's fueled by millions of dollars of lobbyist meals and things like that. I think if you were make some of those changes, you'd create a different atmosphere. So while I disagree with the reporting, I think that it still draws the public to the conclusion there has to be some fundamental reforms in the way that Jefferson City operates.
So I think we have breaking news. I mean, you're arguably the most influential Republican operative in the state, and here you are saying that it's time for ethics reform in Jefferson City.
Oh, I don't think that's breaking
fix this
news.
culture.
I've said it for a long time, and I think a lot of Republicans agree with that.
But why aren't the Republicans taking that legislation and moving it forward?
I think the same reason for 50 years the Democrats didn't, because it's something that they don't see it themselves as a problem, and they don't see it as a priority, and it doesn't, quite honestly,
do
get
as I
votes.
say, not as I do.
Well,
how much morality do you want to
50
legislate?
years in before they have to change.
Well, Mike, how much
the way we're
morality
going,
do you
I
want to
think we will.
legislate? I mean, none of the ethics
Scott,
reform bills would
look,
make any difference
I'm with you on the TMZ nature of some of the reporting that's happening in Jefferson City. I think it is relevant if you have a speaker that was having an affair with a state-funded intern. Outside of that, some of this police report nonsense that's going on, it makes no sense. But we have watched the Republicans who ran on these ethics and this high and mighty belief system that they're the far better party to run government, and they get in there, and what is the first thing they do? Every legislative session, they kill every ethics reform bill that would put a stop to some of the nonsense that's taking place in Jefferson City.
A couple of factual errors there is that there was no alleged affair. It was a texting incident, I guess, if you call that an affair. But more importantly, ethics legislation was advanced and has been passed by Republicans. So to say that first thing they do is a little bit of a Red Bull over exaggeration. So we're going to have to cut back, your energy drinks before you get on.
But I also think, though,
that been a subtweet.
But I also think that government can do its part, and getting the big money out of Jefferson City is a big part of that. And I think, unlimited campaign contributions and some of the nonsense going on leads, I think, to a culture that is challenging.
Missing the point. I think that some very sophisticated political strategist figured if you pushed the attention on an individual politician who is conducting acts with the public, it will take away from the focus on the Republican legislature doing acts on the public.
How come I'm feeling outnumbered here?
Yeah,
I think I'm getting shot from the right and from the left.
You just said campaign contributions. The campaign contributions aren't spent. They're spent on television stations, like the ones this show's on. The campaign contributions aren't the Jeff City issue. I mean, people want to. I think people want to take this and make this series of incidents and fit them into their agenda. How would unlimited campaign contributions have mattered for any of this stuff?
I think the idea that like we said, lobbyist meals and everybody can donate to all of these people.
Which are different than contributions.
Well, but no, not really. Because if they're disclosed, I mean, they say, oh, it's disclosed, so it's okay. But if you can take unlimited meals, you can take unlimited money. I mean, you start to be warped about where the line is and what you should and shouldn't be doing, and you think, oh, I can say and do what I want with anybody in Jeff City, and it's all going to be fine. And I do think that it does lead. Now, do I think government has the ability to legislate morality and prevent people from letting power get to their head? Absolutely not. But I do think government can say, we can let the people know that we're going to try to get this as clean as we can for, in the things that we can regulate, like political contributions.
So you would pass something totally unrelated to these issues and use these issues as the reason?
I would reinstate political campaign contributions that we had. I think the lobbyist gifts are out of control. I think you can ban them. I think you can rein them in. And I think that sends a message that you don't get to do whatever you want to do, take whatever money you want to take, and act the way you want. I think that's part of the problem.
Well, you're a lobbyist. I mean, buying someone dinner, does that fundamentally change their vote?
Well, I try not to do it, because I do local stuff, and it's a reporting nightmare, and I think it is not effective as a tool. I mean, I think everybody ought to pay their own way, to tell you the truth.
David Barklage, if folks pass an ethics bill every week next session, would it change folks' opinion that politicians are corrupt?
Well, I mean, you look at the poll numbers of Congress. I've never seen sustained numbers like this on Congress. I mean, we've seen Congress in the teens for consistently 4 years, and the upside down numbers in the Missouri legislature and Governor Nixon. I think there's just a frustration over healthcare, education, over the economy, that people want to focus, they want answers, and instead they're getting a lot of clutter. And a lot of that clutter is unnecessary clutter that the press has generated to sell stories on just what we were talking about. And then other stories that have been generated by the stupidity of politicians themselves. But, it's the political system. No one has stepped up in either party for years to correct it. It's a bipartisan problem. It is not a Republican problem any more than a Democrat problem.
Well, I would agree with you if they're the fact that we could put all the Democrats in one bus in Jefferson City. I mean, it is a Republican.
Whose fault is that?
But it is a Republican legislature who fails to act and enact real reform. And y'all are the self-proclaimed moral party, yet when it comes to policing yourselves, you're not there.
Is that the problem? Is that the problem they run is maybe more moral? Is that the real hypocritical issue?
No, I think the real problem is that nobody's trying to make a difference. They're running and pushing out a message that they want to reform government and clean it up and throw these doggone, bad people out. But
I don't know if being pro-life or praying to Jesus Christ makes you particularly, it's inconsistent with taking a lobbyist meal. So I'm not quite sure where you see the two of those things relate. That
I missed that one.
A person can be pro-life. That's the moral issue. Most people, when they do moral, it comes down. I think the voters feel it comes down to issues like pro-life or whether you're religious or not. I don't know that most people tie campaign contributions to morality. I think you can be for people spending their money however they want to.
Maybe we should. Maybe we should start looking at it.
And we
that
just
way.
witnessed a legislative session where the Republicans were having to answer to their donors. They did not have the votes to be able to override the governor on right to work. Why were they doing it? Because a extremely wealthy Republican in Southwest Missouri was pushing this legislation. They had to do it knowing that they couldn't ultimately pass this bill and get it over the override because of campaign contributions.
Again, that is completely,
maybe in your world,
Mike
it's completely
Kelley
false.
is one of the greatest guys I've had a chance to work with, but your factual representation, I don't know who this donor you're saying is because that was not a driving force. I know the dynamics that did that. You had John Deal who wanted to show that he could do it, where Tim Jones felt. You had a Senate that felt obligated once the House to do it. And it's not, the final chapter isn't written of whether or not they're going to override. You can't claim an override didn't occur when it hasn't happened.
And we're going to have to end this segment with, as a fellow Southeastern, David Barklage and I just saw your subtle dislike of Southeast Missouri.
Yeah, you couldn't help but relate.
You couldn't even stop yourself.
Shoot at us.
And while we sort out Mike Kelley's underlying mental issues, we'll be right back.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We took the break to get Mike down to the root of his issues with Southeast Missouri, and I think he's somewhat reformed now. But since we have Lou Hamilton on, the chairman of the St. Louis Taxi Commission, been in the news a lot lately about Uber, give us what's going on.
Well, this is the second time in 2 weeks that someone from the news media has actually asked me to give them the facts of what's going on with Uber.
Give it to us.
We've got a meeting of the Taxi Commission next Tuesday. As some of you here know, a year ago when Uber came to town and wanted to operate Uber Black, which is their premium service, we changed our regulations by a unanimous vote, including the industry members that are on the commission. We changed our rules to allow Uber Black to come in. Subsequent to that, they've rolled out Uber X, which is their taxi cab-like operation, and we're going to consider issues on Tuesday at our meeting that will lead to, I think in July, some changes in our code to accommodate the entry of Uber X-like businesses into the St. Louis market. And we're pretty much, I would say, on 90% of the issues that they have with our regulatory
So is
framework.
it down to drug testing and background checks?
That's it.
And you want a different kind of background check?
We want to do what the legislature requires us to do for companies that we license, and that is to have the Highway Patrol conduct a national criminal background check based on fingerprints. It's a one-time deal, doesn't slow anybody up from getting a license. The public has a reasonable expectation that when they get into a vehicle for hire, and these are vehicles for hire. They're not, they're not fist bumping. I'll give you a ride and we can all hang out together. They get paid for doing these services. The public has an expectation that when they get into a car that's been put on the street to bring fares around, that the driver is not a convicted felon. He's not a child molester. He's not somebody that's a drug addict or has a history of violence against others when they get in that car. And that's what the National Fingerprint Check does. Uber maintains that they do their own internet-based
Speaking of
check,
that background check, David, don't you believe that Uber ultimately comes and acquiesces and is a company that abides by those basic rules?
I can't see why not. I mean, it's reasonable. I mean, if Uber has incidences of their drivers in inappropriate conduct or something worse happens, I think then the whole explosion of Uber and the attraction to it is is hurt. So from a market standpoint, it would just make sense that they would want a higher standard to protect their clients because they're faster, they're cheaper. I love Uber in Washington, D.C. You know where they are, they know who they are, everything else. It's just a matter of
I do too.
meeting that
I
standard.
use them when I'm out of town in areas where they're lawfully operating, and they're a good service. I'm anxious for them to come in. But we have to protect the public safety.
Isn't Uber coming, Mike Kelly? It just is a matter of how long is it until they acquiesce to the background
Well, I
check?
think Uber is a movement that's taking over. I think we'd all like to see it. I would do anything to have it because it's so easy to use it in Chicago and D.C., but it is a bit confusing that it's one of the biggest companies on the planet, and it's worried about a background check as it relates to its drivers for the safety of its customers. And this is an agreement, they've agreed to this in other cities.
It's the
So
Republican legislature behind it.
Why is
SEMO,
it acceptable to agree to
Said
these background
overregulation.
tests in Salt Lake City and in Houston and in Kansas City,
I will
but not
stand
in
up
St.
for the
Louis?
Republican legislature on this one.
Amen.
They declined
Go ahead.
to change the law to give Uber free rein. Uber went to the legislature. They hired every lobbyist on the planet except one, I think. And they tried to get the law changed. So, no, not me. I don't do
John
that.
Barget dropped for
It was,
our
it
folks
was John
watching in
Barget.
Kirksville.
But the Republican-dominated legislature, despite having the speaker, who was squarely in Uber's corner, declined to take action on it.
I just think it's
Isn't-
good
and
business.
are
I
they
mean, I would hope so. I would hope that they would be smart enough to say that we're not going to let the background checks and drug testing get in our way of getting into a market. I don't even know how you explain that to people. It's just good business.
And there's a lot of things that happen in St. Louis where we all get mad that we're throwing up roadblocks to making things happen, whether it be a stadium or revitalizing North City or, different policies. But this isn't us throwing up a roadblock. This is common sense.
Dude, it's part of the media's fault that they haven't really broke down what the issues are. It's just this tax cabs doesn't want them. That's the narrative you get right now. Is there a job of the media to step in there and start to explain some of the
Well,
details?
I think that the media has. I think that mainly they've laid out what the issues are. Background checks are essential. I think it's problematic that they've agreed to it in other places, but they won't agree
Most
to
of
it
the
in St.
SEMO
Louis,
media
and they
you're
ought to
talking
put
about.
the spotlight on that.
You get excited on everything.
Let's talk something that everybody's on side. What
They're
about
not paying us to sit here and be
Can
bored.
I'm going to marry two sides here that never go in the same sentence together. The Republican-led legislature did the right thing by not allowing Uber to operate without background checks, not changing the law. The Post-Dispatch, who I almost never agree with, did the right thing 2 weeks ago with an editorial that told Uber, what's the big deal? Get the background check. So you got two diametrically opposed forces
Which
agreeing
means it's
on the
probably
same
gonna
subject.
happen. It's a capitalized company. It's coming. They're just going to end up agreeing to the common sense things.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to operate here, it's easy. We've
take
removed all the
Let's talk about
barricades.
2016, though. Blunt candor. David Barklage, while we have you here, candor is campaigning hard. I mean, you can't check your email without two releases from him or the Democratic Party hitting Roy Blunt, something about Hastert. And, I mean, he's running a good campaign.
Well, I mean, look, I think fundamentally you have Roy Blunt, who's one of the most talented politicians that we've seen. He's very, very effective. He's a very, very good campaigner, and he's going to run a good campaign in a state that probably will not be contested presidentially. I think he's way out in front. And you've got Jason Kander, who is a trial attorney who supports higher taxes, opposes tort reform, is pro-choice, doesn't support Second Amendments, and embraces publicly Obama. I think
what I'm
that
waiting for.
when it comes down to it, it's a 55-45 at best race.
Is that where it is, Jane?
No, I mean, I think Jason is running a phenomenal campaign. I think he's showing the long history that Senator Blunt has in government.
But we've seen
and
people
he's
run good campaigns and lose before.
I understand, but I also think that when people get reminded of the long history that Senator Blunt and also, Congressman Blunt has had in the Washington inside culture that people are so upset about. I mean, this is going to be a race about insider versus, war vet that's looking for some new blood in Congress and really wants to change things and really has the ability to change things. And so I think I was surprised, frankly, that Senator Blunt isn't further ahead. And so I think that no one's going to
Setting the
outwork.
bar.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone's going to outwork Jason Kander. I think he brings fresh ideas. I think he's got a strong story. I mean, a decorated war veteran.
But I will say, Mike, I read a list the Washington Post put out of the top 10 Senate races, and it wasn't on there. Does this race get the money at the end of the day to be competitive?
Well, I think David makes a good point. If Missouri is a presidentially targeted state, and I actually believe that it has a chance to be targeted by...
Is it targeted by the numbers? Does Joyce Sabusi have enough clout nationally with Hillary Clinton to get,
I
if
don't
it's a
think
toss-up,
any
does that push
individual's
Missouri up?
clout is going to make Missouri a target. It's what the voters are wanting. And the voters are not listening to the circus that is the GOP. And I think that we have a strong candidate in Hillary Clinton who's going to come to Missouri and ultimately make this state a place to
but not
play.
likable?
That presidential campaign does make the Senate campaign closer. Does make the race closer. But taking out an incumbent United States Senator is an awfully hard thing to do. And the Democrats have a good, strong candidate who can contrast against Roy Blunt and point out a lot of the nonsense.
Here's the problem. In a presidential year, and look, Jane has a lot of political savvy, but I think in U.S. Senate races, it's more about issues and ideology than profiles. And so Jason Kander does have a good profile. I mean, he's a very likable, good guy. But on the other hand, it's really about Senate races are about the issues and the ideology. And I don't think Missouri is, we know, you guys see the poll numbers, Obama is way upside down the state. And, you know, you've got Kander that's embraced him. He's voted for Obamacare 5 times. And we know where that's been on the state exchange, right or wrong, whether your position is. We know that Obamacare and Obama's policies are very unpopular in an election where it's going to be somewhat a litmus test on Obama or his legacy. I just think that Kander ends up on the losing
Is
side.
likable enough to come in and bring some firepower to help Kander?
You know what? I don't think the voters in Missouri are going to make the ultimate decision based on whether they like the candidate as much as they think that a candidate that they are going to support can make changes that are going to make sense to everyday families. And I think they're going to vote for Hillary. And right now, what do we got, 16, 18 Republicans that are in the race?
It's hard to know.
You know, I'm throwing my support behind Donald Trump because he's paying all of his supporters $50 a piece to show up at their stuff. You know,
Absolutely.
He's been
Didn't he let
successful.
people touch his hair? I mean,
What-
that's
what-
Am I listening to Democrats tell me that they don't like the idea of multi-candidate primaries that are about ideas and policies and different perspectives and things like that?
We love races about ideas. What we're hearing from the Republican candidates is not ideas.
You're not watching Fox News,
it's nonsense.
Mike.
You're
You're watching MSNBC.
Did you see that photograph, that painting that was circulated on the social media recently? It's a Donald Trump photograph, like the Obama thing, that multicolor says, "We shall overcome."
Okay, I mean, you know what? It's
Mike
good.
Kelley,
it's good fun.
look at your crystal ball. Who is the Republican nominee? Last topic.
The smartest candidate would be Jeb Bush. I think that most likely we're going to see a John Kasich versus Hillary Clinton.
Picks Bush. Jane, who you pick?
I don't count out Jeb Bush yet. I think it's going to be a long race, and I don't think you count him out yet.
Lou Hamilton, who you pick?
I think Jeb Bush, because I think money's going to make the difference.
David Barklage, who do you think?
You know, there hasn't been a winning Republican ticket since 1928 that didn't have a Bush or Nixon on it. And so you all saying Bush makes a lot of sense, but I think that Scott Walker and Bush both are there, have very good chances. Rubio is right behind. I would go from a standpoint of what my sense is where the American tone is going, probably to a Scott Walker. And maybe a Jeb Bush.
And that's where we'll leave it for this week. We'll be on hiatus till August 23rd. We're very excited about taking a few weeks off, coming back with our show. Want to thank, obviously, KDNL, ABC 30 in St. Louis, Fox 23 in Southeast Missouri, our new partner, KRCG CBS in Mid-Missouri, and our newest affiliate, KTVO in Kirksville. You've been terrific to work with, and we look excited to coming back to all 4 of our partners after our hiatus. And we'll see you next time on This Week in Missouri Politics.